This book contains names and stories of First Nations people who have passed on. At times, it also covers issues of a sensitive and traumatic nature. These are voluntarily shared by First Nations AA members active in recovery from alcoholism, using the 12 steps of AA and supporting others to do the same.
My name is Colin, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm a Gumbaynggirr gear man on the north coast of New South Wales. Our totem here is the ocean, which we call Gargle. And my personal totem is a shark. The closest town to us is Nabaka, which means, in Gumbaynggirr language, entrance to the waters. Regardless of where I was born and raised, I believe the disease of alcoholism had me right from the start. I picked up my first drink at 40, but I can remember from an early age having all these insecurities, doubts and fears. I felt uncomfortable and awkward most days, and even though I was good at sport and academically, I never believed it. I don't think it helped being raised by a drunken father, as my father skirted around the laws imposed on Aboriginals back then, especially when it came to growing. We lived on a mission that was managed by the Aboriginal Welfare Board and the police, and it was strict. But my dad had a certificate of exemption that allowed him to drink at the pubs in town. Good for him, not so good for us. Fridays when Dad got paid were always the worst. He would stumble through the doors after a night of drinking, angry and ready to fight. He and Mum would have loud arguments while my older brother Walter and I hid under the bed in terror. Even though Walter was only 4 years of age, he somehow knew how to reassure me those nights while I cried in his arms. Might be one of the reasons we remained so close until he died in 1996. To this day, I still don't like Fridays. Eventually, Walter and I weren't the only kids in the house. Before long, there were 14 of us running around, attending school and church, unaware of how hard we had it. Our open mission was rough and tough. At first, we had no electricity, no hot water, no toilet. There was no post and no rubbish collections. We had to care and we had to share. It was how we survived. Like other Aboriginal kids in our community, I made it through kinder to year 6. It wasn't until high school, when I was bused, or taking buses to St. Patrick's School, that I got a taste of being a minority at a mostly white kids' college. Initially, I was terrified of those new, strange surroundings, but for some reason, I didn't spend much time thinking about race. There was us and there was them. That's how I saw it anyway. I think part of me assimilated into the school's culture while still looking onto my own. Maybe that's how I ended up making some good white mates at St. Patrick's, who I still see around town today. We stop each other in the street and still say hello. Sometimes I wonder if those days, those boys understood all that was troubling me back then. I'm lucky to still know them, since back in the days I didn't stick around St. Patrick's for long. Right around that first drink at 14, I quit school altogether. It wasn't for me. Still isn't. And for that, I have no regrets. The regrets come later was the drinking, but not straight away. That first drink was euphoric. As soon as I was handed that bottle of wine, my mates ran in the street, I suddenly didn't feel awkward anymore. I was a sitting duck and didn't have a clue. I was 10 feet tall and thought to myself, it's no wonder people drink. I was relieved for the first time ever. Although I had a way out and escape from my doubts and fears, it solved all my problems and completely changed my personality. From that night on, every time I had a problem, real or imaginary, I remembered the effects of alcohol. My mates around the community must have had the same feeling. Like my dad, we got real good at getting around the system. We even worked up a code with the taxi drivers. Between the 7 or 8 of us, we managed to pay the drivers for the fares and the grog. We'd sit at the back end of the trees and ration it one glass at a time. Then someone would call the taxi again. It didn't take long for the police to find our drinking spot. They would drive around 5 or 6 times. I guess they tried to warn us from something, but we didn't pay much attention. We just keep passing the bottle around before ultimately being hit with some consequences. A couple of times, me and my mates got arrested and had to go to the courts since drinking on a mission wasn't allowed. We'd spend a few nights in jail, and then we'll be back on the grog as soon as we got the chance. In my teens, trouble with the law was only the beginning. My partner Lorraine and I lived together in a de facto relationship, and within a few years we ended up with 4 kids together. She was my childhood sweetheart, and we had it good living on the mission. The way we thought we were lucky to have people around who would look after our kids while we went out drinking. However, it didn't take long for our bodies to start breaking down. By 18, I was being admitted also for a liver and kidney problem. And even though Lorraine was drinking as much as me, she never went and saw any doctors except during her pregnancies. 6 years we lived like that, avoiding the responsibilities and realities of life. That is until the day I buried her. I remember the night I heard the news. I was down by the river with the boys having a big session, diving for oysters. When we climbed out of the water, the police were standing on the riverbank, saying the unbelievable words that my partner had passed away. The news shattered me. Unfortunately, the only way people knew how to sympathize was to buy me a drink. We had to wait a few days during sorry business, with no grog and no noise. But then it was straight back into it. With all the grief rolling around inside, I thought I had a reason to keep drinking. Today, through the program, like it says in the Serenity Prayer, I now have the wisdom to know the difference between a reason and an excuse. At the time of Lorraine's death, however, I wasn't ready. For 2 more years, my disease only got worse. The problems with my organs carried on, and I also started breaking all kinds of bars. Then I discovered that Valium, crushed up, helped with the DTs, and soon I started hearing voices wandering around lost and alone. I couldn't see that I too was headed for an early grave. Meanwhile, down in Sydney, one of the miracles of the program was starting to come together. An Aboriginal lady called Val, who was 10 years sober at the time, 1974, saw the need to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous to communities in New South Wales. She was a local girl from Nambucca who had moved to Sydney and gotten sober there. She married a kind white fella called Jim, who was a school teacher. Although she has since passed away, she did some amazing work in her life as Aboriginal alcoholics all over Australia. Without any outside fund, Val started Pelham's Haven, which still exists today. Val and Jim's turned an old big empty house into a safe place for Aboriginal men to come and get sober while attending AA meetings. At the time, Val's cousin was in a ward in Sydney for the criminally insane. On Holy Thursday 1974, she brought him to Venlo Haven to start him on the program. He was the first out of Val's place. He's still alive today and living back in Nambucca, although he's since passed away. And long after Val opened the rehabilitation centre, she visited our community. When me and 2 other guys each had a place for alcoholic men, we jumped in the car and couldn't get there any quicker. We thought for sure this was going to be the best place around to get a drink. Once we arrived in Venlo Haven, I went straight to the fridge and shouted, "Where's the grog?" When we were none too pleased to learn that Venlo Haven was a sober house. It took me another 6 months or so, but eventually I ended back in Val's doorstep. This time ready to attend my first AA meeting. When I walked in, I was surprised to see white men sitting there too. They appeared stable, my very first AA meeting, and were well dressed. I didn't believe they were alcoholics. Then they started talking about the 12 steps, which I didn't understand, since there were only 3 or 4 steps leading into the building. There was a kind, caring woman named Esther, who was the secretary of AA, who gave us all a typical warm AA welcome that kept so many around for years. Our lasted 3 weeks were then found an excuse to pick up a drink again. This time it was an Aboriginal football match in Redfern, and didn't drink. Even though I had some understanding of AA at the time, I still didn't comprehend the progressive nature of the disease. By 3 or 4 o'clock that afternoon, I took a drink, and within days I was living in the streets of an inner city suburb. I slept in empty houses when I could find them, and spent time in a homeless shelter that was nothing like Valshaven. I couldn't go to the shelter for food. I would go to the shelter for food, and it was a good place to buy drugs and a drink. Luckily, I didn't stay there for long. A priest called Ted Kennedy heard I wanted to get back home. He managed to get me a train ticket and was wise enough not to give me money for it. Then back at the mission, when I got home, it was my worst and final rock bottom. I became completely derelict, and my friends and family waiting for me to die. When Val's Loop came back around on a goodwill trip, I attended an AA meeting drunk. They came to my house the next morning to pick me up and take me and a few others back to Bellingham. I can't remember the trip, but I'll never forget what waited for me when I arrived. Once I arrived, when those boys saw the mess I was in, they held me in their arms without judgment. They told me they loved me, and they picked me up off the stoop and carried me to the house. Somehow, Ed, Bobby, Georgie, Johnny, and Abby found the only spark left in me during it was my deepest, darkest hour. If it hadn't been for them and Val, I would have died that day. Somehow I responded to them. It was a long haul back. I attended many meetings and was treated with kid gloves since I was so broken. But one guy told it to me straight. He said to go home. From the meeting, he said to go home, forgive God and forgive others. I did that on my knees in my room, which gave me some of the spiritual strength I needed to go on. I stuck closer to the program and didn't pick up. Thankfully, Val found a children's home in Western Sydney, where my kids stayed during those first months of my sobriety. She wanted me to get well and not have to worry about that. Along with her caring ways, her the strong, disciplinary nature we all needed. And if we broke the rules, we were out. After a while, I got myself together enough to become supervisor and help run the aerospace. If she hadn't been stricken loving at the same time, I never would have turned the corner in what felt at the time, still does, like a true miracle. A story like mine and many others, it was no wonder that word started to spread. People all over Australia were wearing about Bellingham and wanted to see what it was all about. The one white guy, called Bill from Paddington AA, joined and decided he wanted to help. He donated a high school bus. It was to pick up Aboriginal men from Townsville to the Torres Strait. I went along with some of the ride where we would carry the message about the nature of the disease and how life could be better without alcohol. By 1975, drugs were coming to us, from even as far as Western Australia. They took trains and tractors down. They wanted to get into Bellingham bus. They wanted to get sober more and learn more about the program. There was an incredible ripple effect about these bus trips that still sent chills up and down my spine. When I wasn't on the bus, I continued other services, roles back at the house. Like cook, counselling and driver, we all did. We worked together following the example that Val and Jim set. Through them in the program, we learned love, understanding, patience and compassion for others. Men generally stayed for 3 months at a time. We covered a step a week of the 12 steps, while we all continued to learn about alcoholism. Val and Jim left a legacy that still stands today as a place for Aboriginal men and women looking for a new way of life. What happened to me there has happened to many since. I left Bellingham knowing I could never drink again. Once my kids and I returned to the community, life got better. Jim suggested a few of us start our own group and meeting, which we did. We had our own bus that fitted up to 23 people. It made me proud to drive around picking up others who wanted to get sober and find a better life. We provided transport, made sure the door was open, and gave away what was so freely given to us. I became more responsible in my family and eventually married a woman called Christine, who had 4 kids of her own. For the next 40 years, Christine and I had a good life together. We lived in our backyards, Gongi Kotha, and provided a good home for our 8 children until she passed away from cancer in 2019, a few years ago. I used to tell her that she was more than a wife, but more than a mother. She was a person of our caring heart. Together we took in kids off the street and let them stay as long as they wanted and needed. Christine wasn't an alcoholic, but she supported the program and always pitched in to help us at meetings. Even after she got sick, Christine inspired me with her strength and resilience. She treated the days of her treatment like any other day. She would jump out of bed and say her prayers and look after the house and kids. I don't know where she got the energy. It was her life on her mind. Yet I was the one who was tired. But none of us, this was an excuse to pick up a drink. Even on the day she died, I got church sober. On this day, I had the strength of all our power. On the day that she died, a program and love and care I needed from others to make it true. Today, looking back, I can't believe how much I have changed. From that young boy, he was riddled with all those fears and insecurities. I had to find a way to dig down deep and make amends which is hard for me. But if I want to stay sober, I must be willing to admit what I've done. It's not simple, but it's an easy process to follow. I now have a relationship with God, peace of mind, self-forgiveness, and self-acceptance. I meditate and I pray. I smile at strangers on the street. I sit at meetings, often the guy with the longest sobriety, and I listen. He gives me the humility I need to continue as a program one day at a time. Above all, I've learned through Alcoholics Anonymous how to spread the message of hope that sobriety brings. I feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg. I truly believe the best is yet to come for all of us. Thank you all very much.